Welcome to the Dadlit Pod, the literary podcast for people who will never be satisfied with your life choices. My name is Daniel Roberts. I'm your host. Tonight I'm joined by Timothy Robare, born in Grand Isle, Vermont, on the Quebec border. He obtained his writing degree at Plattsburgh State. He's an athlete, a vegetarian, a world traveler who's been to 63 countries. Now he lives in Portland, Oregon. He's also the author of the Tales of Battle series, Tales spelled Tails. This includes The Fox, The Jaguar, The Mysterious Island, and Embers of Darkness. Timothy, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me.
So, Tim, can I call you
Absolutely.
Tim? Tell me about Embers of Darkness. Tell me about the Tales series and who's your audience? What are you going for? What's your inspiration?
All right. Well, Tales of Battle in general, I think, is meant for people that grew up loving Redwall and ended up loving Game of Thrones because I think it's a nice medium between the two. Um, so Tales of Battle itself has animal humanoids because I always loved Redwall and it was a big deal for me, and I wanted to. I ended up loving Game of Thrones, but I watched or read that afterward, and so it's originally the fox was supposed to be this big hero, and a lot of the animals were supposed to represent certain things. In this novel I was writing while working at a gas station at night,
Yep.
and it's got the first book is more sword fighting and world building, and then second book is has magic come in, like elemental magic. It's pretty gruesome, I would say. I've had women love it, but it's definitely more written for probably people around our age and dads and people that like that kind of graphic violence battle that I feel like a lot of men and especially dads are into. We all love Rome apparently, and ancient Greece and everything. So I think it's up the alley of people for that. Embers of Darkness brings in like dark magic and a lot more chaos across my world that I built. A lot more battles, a lot more characters, a lot more complications. But a lot of my characters also bring in things like suicide and real life things that people face. So I try to tie this really fantastical world into really human issues that we face today, as individuals.
And so you did this while you were working at a gas station.
Book one, yeah, I had a pen and paper and well, a pen and a notebook, and I wrote the whole thing in this little like I don't even know, tiny little notebook. Um, Mostly between like 9 p.m. and midnight for about a year and a half, and then translated it all on the
Yeah, and
computer, which was fun.
where do you get the grit
Get to what? Sorry.
to oh, sorry. Just having connection issues.
Yeah, your bars are yellow. It looks
You
like.
still there?
Yep.
Oh no. I've moved into a more successful part of the house. Okay, so let me start the question over. Where do you get the grit to sit and to pen to paper write an entire novel while you're working overnight at the gas station?
I'm a pretty hard worker, so I would get everything I needed to get done, and then I it was on a small island where I grew up, so there's only like not very many people that even live there. And in between customers, I would just kind of write, and all the character. I have a good memory, so everything stays in my head, so I know exactly where I end off, exactly where I'm going. So I never had a problem having to check back really. So
Yep.
I would just kind of go with it, especially for like the last hour, because I would have all my closing work done, and maybe I would get one or two customers that late that were coming to get beer, cigarettes, whatever. But it was pretty easy. And my bosses, I mean, I would get everything I needed to get done. And they asked me a few times, they're like, hey, we see that you're doing this on camera. And I was like, yeah, but I get everything done. And they were like, okay, well, can't argue that. So
What would they have preferred you doing? Mopping the floor?
yeah, but I already did that too at that point. They were just kind
Yes.
of, they were just kind of hardcore. They're like, you should be working all the time. And I actually wrote them a 3-page paper of why I should be able to use my cell phone and write in my notebook because I did more than everybody else. And it was an actual like essay style paper because I had just graduated college.
Yeah.
So I wrote them a 3-page paper, and my boss came back and he put it down in front of me and he said, "Whatever, I don't care."
I bet he didn't read it. Well, that's fun. So you are from the border between Quebec and Vermont.
Yep.
That area is particularly interesting to me. I come from Maine, and the the border region. Sorry, I'm moving. My daughter's coming in. She's going to scream at me, as is the way when you film a dadlit pod or when you record a dadlit pod.
It only makes sense.
It only makes sense. So it interests me because I want to write a horror novel about the border between Canada and the United States. And one of the things that I think is interesting is when it comes to borders, these sort of kind of superficial imposition uh, of of cultural division. And I think the part that I'd like to write about when I do the border between Vermont and Canada is all the people who have OUIs on the American side and can't go to Canada, and all the people that have OUIs on the Canadian side and can still come to the United States. And I was wondering if you were to try and capture the sort of essence of living on the border. This is purely for my because it's an interesting place to live, right? Particularly before 9/11, it was relatively uh, porous in that people could go across the border. How would you describe it now?
I mean, we were always going back and forth to Quebec, especially in high school
Hmm.
because you can drink at 18 over there. So everybody was going over there. Um, there's like 20 different borders that we would cross depending on how easy we wanted it and how desolate. Like some of them are just little booths and they
Yep.
just wave you through. There's not really any questions. Some of them are a little more intense. Uh, but they're utilized a ton because we have all the Quebecois that come down, the rich Quebecois, which
Mhm.
would be super cool for a horror story because they come and they spend the summer in the islands on their big yachts.
Yep.
Um, and then, yeah, I mean, the borders there are weird because it's pretty easy unless you're on the interstate one, which a lot of Canadians take. And then a lot of them are just these backcountry, podunk, middle of nowhere borders that you just cross into nowhere land. And there's not really a lot on the border right there. So you're
Yeah.
just going into this area of nothingness basically, and then transitioning to a totally different culture, to a French culture. And on the other
Hmm.
side of the border is Naperville, where people went to drag race in their little street cars with NOS, like want to be Fast and the Furious, but the poor version, the Timu version. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, I don't know. The border experience is pretty cool. I've been held up at gunpoint for thinking I was a cocaine trafficker.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I went to a Hulk Hogan WWE event, and my stepdad hit the barrier at the Quebec border at like 1 in the morning. So we got like held up at gunpoint then by the border patrol. So it can be pretty wild, but overall, it's usually just pretty lax.
Yeah. Would you say that the border guards sort of get to know you?
No, because I don't even remember seeing the same one. Maybe the one at the small border, but because we would cross so many different borders, it was pretty rare to see the same one.
Yeah.
Um, And the problem is if they know you, they see you too much, and that's when they think you're doing something wrong because it's a big drug border,
Yes.
especially the smaller parts, which is why I got held up in my shitty little Geo tracker that was falling apart, no rocker panels, like everything falling off of it. And I had like a
Geo
like a
tracker.
I had like a stereo subwoofer, like an actual one for inside the house that I had hot wired into my car. So it's just like this ghetto little piece of shit. And this guy had my car torn apart because he thought I was running coke. And I said, dude, don't you think I'd have a better car if I was a cocaine dealer? Um, because I was
By the
dating a
way,
Quebecois.
a geo tracker, you could really just take that apart with like a Swiss Army knife at that point.
Oh yeah, it's basically just a
It's not
four
a
wheeler with a top.
robust. It's not a robust vehicle.
No, it's basically a four wheeler with a Velcro top.
Yes. So you went to school in Plattsburgh.
University. Yep.
Yes. And how was that experience? What would you say? Because there's a lot of talk these days about going to school for liberal arts majors and whether it has the value that one would be expected to pay for it. How would you describe your experience at what is it? Is it SUNY Plattsburgh or the University of Plattsburgh?
It's SUNY Plattsburgh University, I think. I don't know. I get confused
Yeah.
about that part actually. Um, I would say that it was really unique and exciting in the way that
Hmm.
you're with people of like mind. You are learning. Some of my professors were absolutely incredible people. Some of them were weird as hell, but literally absolutely incredible. I mean, one had a degree in Latin and was like one of the only fluent Latin speakers in the world, like with a certificate. One would make us write essays, but in each essay we'd have to make up our own word, and he would have to understand what that word was utilized as. One took us to a bar for our final, and just like all we did was have a conversation. She bought us all food and drinks. So in that way, it's really cool. I mean, I took play classes, which is outside of my realm, and I think it really helps you harness certain areas and figure out where you want to be. It also confuses you because the more you learn about English, the more it doesn't make sense. So that was complicated. But I would say in the US, obviously university is overpriced. We all know that. So I don't know if it's worth because I've made, I don't know, maybe $300 off my books, which means I have to make back 41,200 more or whatever to pay off my student loans. So in that way, maybe not worth it, but I also don't think you can trade the knowledge and the experience you gain doing it. So it's really 50-50 because it's so, because I remember it really fondly. I mean, I was forced to be Lucifer in one of our plays. And I mean forced, like everybody forced me because they told me I'd be the perfect Lucifer, which I don't know if that's a compliment or not still. Um,
I mean, having just met you, I think you could do an excellent Lucifer. I'm going to be perfectly honest.
Thank you. Actually, after it was done, my teacher said, "Huh, you are a good Lucifer." And I was like, "Gosh," I was like, "I don't. Please don't tell my mom that because she's a hardcore Catholic and she might just like die." But yeah, I don't think you can. Part of me wishes I stayed with genetics because that was my original field. Was I wanted to be a geneticist, but I wanted to help clone like saber-tooth tigers. But also, I just really think what I gained was invaluable, and I do wish I networked a little more. But
Yeah, so what's the goal with your writing now?
I mean, I've had a few articles published for a romance magazine, so that's nice because that makes me way more money than my books do.
Hmm.
I wanna. It depends on the day. If you asked me 2 days ago, I would have said burn all my books and cry. Today, I'm feeling good, so I wanna. I mean, my series is done. My book three is being edited. My other three books I need to edit, but they're done. I'm working on another book right now, and then I have another book that I'm outlining for the first time ever because I'm a super pantser and I do not outline because I just don't do it. It's not fun to me, but I'm gonna try it for once just to see what it's like because I like a good challenge. Um, I would say my goal is just to have people enjoy my work and build the worlds that I want to build and hope to get a following. Money is not really, I mean, obviously we all want to make money from our books, but it's not my end goal. As nice as it would be to pay off my student debt,
Yeah.
but
What do
right now it's
you
just kind of finding readers.
Yeah, you suggested when you sent me your bio that you travel a lot. What's the inspiration for that? Are you an influencer? Are you just traveling because you love to travel? I found that after college, I traveled a lot for work purely because I wasn't a dad then and it was open to me. And that's what I spent my money and my time on.
Much to everybody's dismay, I'm not an influencer. I have a lot of people that want me to be, but I refuse because I think it's inauthentic and I think it tends to ruin the beautiful places, which I've seen personally. I've seen influencers find local spots and just trash them all the way from, near where I live now to all across the world. Originally, I traveled right after college because all the romantic poets becoming like a true poet or a true man of the art or whatever, they would go to Italy and Greece and they would travel. And
Hmm.
I was always obsessed with ancient Greece and ancient Rome because why not? So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go for a summer. And I ended up going to Egypt too because I had like an extra week, and I was like, where should I go? And I was in Greece, so I was like, I'm going to Egypt. Screw it. And I think I just really the first week was really hard, and I was like, what the hell did I get myself into? I got food poisoning. I was like dying, but I really met some amazing people. Um, an amazing Italian woman really got me to stay, and then I ended up meeting this Quebecois, which is super weird. And
Ah,
we just happened to be on the same train, and she asked me a
donnez-moi
question.
le bleu.
Yeah, pretty much. She asked me a question. I was like, wait, what? And then I was like, are you Quebecois? And she was like, yeah. So we took a train. We ended up, she's an older lady. She was waiting for her husband to meet her in like a week. So we went to Naples. I had no hostel. We stayed in the hostel. She brought me to dinner and we just like hung out and it was really cool. Then I got food poisoning. Um, Tried to run home. Then the nice Italian lady at the airport got me a really fancy hotel and told me to take 3 days and wait on it.
Yeah.
So I did, and I continued my travel, and I think I just really fell in love with the people. Egypt was absolutely insane in every way, totally like the opposite of everything I've ever known. I had some really weird experiences, and from that moment on, I was like, like this is what life's about is learning and growing. And on that travel and every travel since, for the most part, I just made really good friends. I've met people, some that I still keep in contact with, some that were just like really cool in that moment, experiences that I could never have ever thought I would have, and
Hmm.
some good and some bad, and some in between. But it just really opened my eyes to everything the world is and to growing as a person. And I think when I travel, I can really fully be myself, which I can't always be at home. And I'm totally free, and that's something really beautiful to me. So
Well, that's an interesting question. Why do you feel you can't be yourself when you're home? And how do you define home?
um I define home as the US because I moved around a lot. I think
Hmm.
because I've never really fallen in the lines of US social norms. And I mean, growing
Oh,
up in
do you?
Vermont, everything's different anyway. But
Yeah. Yeah. How would you? Well, this is an interesting question because I think um, a lot of places where we come from influence us as authors. I think of, for example, Maine, where I'm from, which instilled in me kind of a macabre Yankee value system, which is part utilitarian and part almost a pessimism, a perpetual pessimism. You informed me in an email that you're a big fan of Game of Thrones, and in Maine, winter is coming. And everyone should be aware of that and prep for it and live within the constraints and the darkness and misery of it. It is to me, having grown up in Maine, Stephen King makes all of Stephen King's books just make sense to me. They're I think he actually is a little more cosmopolitan with his characters by moving them into Maine and then subjecting them to Maine weirdness. I think if you come from Maine, you have sort of this almost default pessimism, or the Australians call it like the tall poppy syndrome, which is don't get too far above the field of poppies, or you'll get your head cut off. Um, so interested in the idea that you, as a person from Vermont, which is, I would say, commonly understood as a left-wing liberal haven in the United States, and you now being in Portland, Oregon, which is a place where I hope you're helping to keep Portland weird. Why would you say that just doesn't sort of suit you? And how would you say that has does that come from your romantic influences? Does that come from your desire to sort of write and feel sort of liberated in that way? It's an interesting question.
Well, I'm not a city person, so the city doesn't help my writing at all. Growing up in Vermont, I mean, nobody really believed, especially my family, like, why would you ever get a degree in English?
Yeah.
Now they're kind of more supportive. They read it, and I don't know how I feel about that. There's some weird shit in my novels, but um, and my mom, literally for God and the 12 Nights, asked me, which is just a stupid novel that's not even written that well. I just wrote it because I was really bored writing. Not bored. I needed an outlet to write my series because it was so intense. So I was like, I'm gonna just write this silly book on the side. And Lucifer is the good guy and God's the bad guy. And she said, "Why would you she said, "Why would you do that?" And I said, "It's just a fantasy novel." And she said, "Why are you fantasizing about Lucifer being good?" And I was like, "Mom, that's not what that means." So I'm saying that because where I grew up, people aren't very intellectual. There's not Most people don't get degrees. Most people just work on farms or work in the stores or work in their parents' businesses, and most people don't leave the islands. Maybe to go to Burlington, maybe Plattsburgh. That's it. They don't really go anywhere. Um, Not a lot of people want to do more, and not a lot of people are. Not that they're not smart, no, because I'm not saying people where I'm from aren't smart. They're just not into higher intelligence, like learning. Where I was always much more curious and interested, and I grew up on a farm. My grandparents owned cows and horses. My grandpa was a truck driver. So growing up in those small towns, you are limited in that way. But I also think growing up in small towns makes you more creative in the way that you have to have outlets because there's not much to do. So your imagination has the ability to run wild. You're also not surrounded by noise and cars and craziness all the time. If anything, you're surrounded by the opposite. You're surrounded by frogs. You can see the Milky Way, and you're surrounded by birds and grass. And I think your imagination can just run wild. And I think in that way, where I grew up was a huge deal because at the time I grew up, my grandparents were the only one on the road besides one other house. Now there's like 20 other houses because a lot of rich people have moved to the islands where I live and built houses. But I got to see the transition period. I got to see the period. What I guess everybody at my age got to see the period. I don't know how it was like in different places, but I got to see the period of the farming culture of the islands change to a more rich culture. And like I said, we had the Quebecois, so I grew up with a totally different culture because the Quebecois would come back and forth. We would go back and forth. I dated French girls in high school and everything. So I think the area is just really interesting in that way. And I mean, every day I would go from Vermont to New York for high school, and every day I
Mhm.
would go by Fort Blunder, which is this fort that they built for the Revolution, but they built it on Canadian land, first of all. So they had to buy that piece of land from Canada. And they built it facing the wrong way. So it never got used because they built the fort. That's why it's called Fort Blunder. It's nicknamed because they built this fort that was useless because it couldn't even attack the British or defend against them. And people would try to get to it and stuff. So it's just this fort on the water that you pass every day to go to school. And I and obviously that area, the area from where I grew up all the way down to Ticonderoga, is huge for the Revolution. So you have all of this history, which in the U.S. I think is pretty limited. We don't have a ton of that history like Europeans do and Asians. So I think in that way, it also is really unique to grow up in an area where the dawn of modern American history came. And I think all of that just kind of had this big influence. And obviously, growing up unable to hear, where there's not really a lot to fix that because I was not in a city.
Yeah.
Um, so I grew up just writing and stuff and not being able to speak very well. So writing came more naturally. So I just think the way I grew up, how I grew up, and where I grew up really is very impactful. And like you said, winters are brutal, but where I grew up and in most places in Vermont, I think you're walking down the road, people that you don't even know wave to you.
Yeah.
Everybody waves to each other. Everybody says, "How are you doing?" Everybody's kind. I wrote my first book about a World War II vet that my mom was an at-home nurse for on the islands. I put it on I brought it to work with me at the gas station, and almost every person bought it, and every person at my mom's church bought it. Everybody was buying the book to support me. So that's one huge difference between where I live now is it's hard to build a community in the cities. I think
Uh-huh.
everything is very like niche and everything is very people are all segregated in cities, it seems like. Whereas where I grew up in a small little island area, everybody comes together to help everybody, and everybody might be in everybody's business, which is true. And it is that crazy place where the redneck at the trailer will punch the cop in the face, and the cop will come to work with a black eye because everybody knows each other. They're high school people.
Yeah.
Um, so it is very like almost like a comedy, but people really are there for each other and super supportive and just pretty authentic and incredible. So I do think where I grew up had a huge role in everything that I am now.
It's interesting. You bring up Fort Blunder, and I don't know if you're familiar, but during the 19th century, because of course there was an almost universal obsession with Greek and Roman culture in the United States during the 19th century. But people, when they would go on vacations, would go up the Hudson River Valley and go up to what I imagine is Lake Champlain.
Yep.
Yeah. And they would visit the Revolutionary War in 1812 forts as ruins. It was a sort of a tourist experience for wealthy New Yorkers getting out of the city in the summer. And I just think it's interesting that growing up in a place with those continually present, that you would develop a an affection and a sense of the romance of Greek and Roman civilization, because the people have been doing that in that particular area for now 200 years.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We also have like a famous. I didn't know it was famous. We have St. Anne's Shrine that's on the smallest island that Samuel D. Champlain came. He founded it, whatever. It's like
Mhm.
this. It's this really pretty shrine, and I guess people from all over the world come to it, which is rich people for the most part. Because I don't even know how people know where I live, and they
Yes.
come from all over the place and come to visit this shrine, which I didn't know until I was I think like 20 or whatever. And I was like, wait, what? People like actually come to visit this? It is weird. And we have famous people that come and they hide basically in the islands. Keith Urban owns a
Yeah.
little island. President Snow from the Hunger Games, he came into the place I worked a couple times. And they come to there because they want to escape and because half of the people in the islands don't know who they are. And the other half of the people in the islands don't care if you're rich or famous, that you're just a person to them.
Yeah.
So it's a cool place to escape for that. So yeah, it's for sure unique. There is like a weird, I guess now living in the South, living in Colorado and now on the West Coast, there is a very, like you said, romantic appeal to the area I grew up and a very special appeal that I would have never realized until I moved away.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I think the West almost feels newer, even though something like the islands on Champlain are not actually that old compared to Greek and Roman civilization. It's not,
Right.
it's not uh, all that all that old. It's relatively recent. But that's an interesting thing. I could certainly see where, as a young person on an island, the presentation of the world would be pretty exciting and would create almost a desire to travel and to engage with that. Um, the so you brought up the fact you are a fantasy author, and I actually don't read a lot of fantasy, and I have heard of the Red Wall
Mhm.
and a guy named uh, Jamie Bryden or Bryden brought it up to me. And you also mentioned that you are a George R. Martin fan, and I am as well, of the Game of Thrones books. But I don't write fantasy, so I'd be intrigued, you as a fantasy author, how do you get George out of the pickle he's in right now? And how do we get The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring written?
Well, HBO needs to leave him alone, so I'd kick HBO out. Just kidding. That's a see. I feel bad for George a little bit. Um, GRM, I'm your biggest fan, so if you ever listen to this, just so you know, I feel bad for him because I think he's got himself in a predicament, but also he's living the writer's dream. Which one of us that's writing doesn't want an HBO contract and making crazy money to make a show off of something you've written? That's a dream beyond a dream to me. So
Yes.
there is that. I do feel bad for him. I do think, and I do think people are a little bit harsh on him, which is fair to some extent because we're all waiting for book six that he keeps talking about and then never doing anything with.
Hmm.
The way I would get him out of the pickle is I would just have Jamie Lannister kill everybody if it was my choice, first of all. But I think he
Hmm.
needs to find his. I think he really needs to sit down and find his love for what he's doing. I think all the pressure has gotten to him and what everybody
Yeah.
wants, and I think the ending of the show totally screwed him up. I think he was totally. I think he was blown away by the disregard that HBO kind of gave him in the Game of Thrones series, the directors, how they treated him supposedly, and what they did to his work. I mean, butchering his work season, the last season specifically, just butchering everything he created basically.
Yeah.
Um, I think that might have taken a toll because I can imagine, right now I'm rewatching the Wheel of Time while I'm reading the books, and I'm like, wow, they really butchered Wheel of Time. There's no comparison because Game of Thrones is at least good, and Wheel of Time shows kind of ass. But
Hmm.
um, I can just imagine what it's like having someone kind of butcher your work and go and just destroy it, and having it then be like, oh my gosh, how am I actually supposed to end this? Like, and having all these different opinions fly in the modern age of social media. Um, So I think he really just needs to go far away because he can afford it. He can go wherever the hell he wants. Get
Yeah.
in a cabin and just sit there and be like, okay, I need to write this for me. I need to go back to the beginning when I was writing before I was big name, when I was a no one getting rejected by what 70 publishers or whatever it was, um, and sit
I mean,
down.
at this point, that's pretty standard for
Right?
all of
Yeah,
us.
yeah, that's true. But not all of us are multimillionaires now. But I think he just needs to go back to the love of writing. I think he needs to go by himself and write the book for him, not for everybody else. And I think that's the
Yep.
problem probably that he's facing is he's trying to figure out now, oh, how's everybody going to love my work? And Game of Thrones did do a good job, the show, at showing him what not to do and what people don't want. So in a way, he's had an advantage. Um, yeah, I think just get down to it and do his work, or give it to Sanderson, one or the other.
Give it to Sanderson. The, the Game of Thrones is one of these interesting television shows where I had finished all the books that he'd written up to the point where Game of Thrones came out. And I actually met him on the day that he released A Dance with Dragons. He was in Natick, Massachusetts, and I stood in
Whoa.
line for an ungodly amount of time, and I was on vacation. And I got him to sign my copy of A Dance with Dragons the day it came out at Barnes and
What?
Noble. Yep, yep.
Wow.
And he's very small. And he was wearing his Greek fisherman hat. And I just read for like a week because I was so excited. I was so excited to get it. And I know that when The Winds of Winter comes out, I will be just as excited.
Oh, me too, for sure. I'll probably pee a little.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing about him that I really like, and I've talked about this on past podcasts, is the vibrancy of characters. I like the way he writes chapters. I really enjoy how different all of his characters are. And I actually a lot of people talk about him subverting genre. I don't actually think he subverts genre at all. I think he just gives genre its full emphasis in everything that it's capable of receiving, which to me shows a great love and respect for the fantasy genre. And I really enjoy it. I find it very, very thrilling to read his work, which is why I'm so bummed out that half my life he still hasn't he still hasn't published The Winds.
For sure. I mean, I'll get flack for this, I'm sure, for people listening. I think George R. R. Martin is a master world builder. I think he is literally right next to Tolkien as far as world building capacity goes in the way his world is built. I think he's a master with words. I The way he utilizes words, I can't even imagine doing. I would need like 40 years in university to even think about it. And the characters are so complex and raw and beautiful. And when you have everybody from Ned Stark to Tyrion to Oberyn to the Mountain, you have these characters that are all complex in their own ways and simple in their own ways. And to have so many characters well thought out with different, paths and different desires, but also similar desires, and have them all weave in and out of this web and do it so well, I think is beyond incredible. Honestly, every time I read his books, I'm blown away. It's the only series I've ever read where I'm 100% captivated on every single word.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very exciting. It's he's captured the ability to create a sense of literary thrill. He understands the limitations of the novel and does a terrific job playing with those limitations and utilizing them to make the story that much more interesting. And
Yeah,
I think well done on his part. And I can see where it's difficult to write that and to produce it at this stage, though my solution would be for him to actually slow down and produce more books rather than cut out things that might be of value to the characters, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense. I agree in general with him slowing down. I think
Yeah,
he's taking on too much, and I think at this point he needs to think about where he started, which is his books, and really just like get into it and work it out, especially where book five ended. Because if you just end it there, it's crazy.
yeah.
Everything going on at the end of book five and to be left with it forever is it's actually heartbreaking to an extent. But it
Well,
also
it's
almost
in
feels
the
George.
middle. Yeah, it's in the middle of a bunch of action sequences.
Yeah, exactly. Everything that you've been reading for thousands of pages is now coming all at once,
Yes.
and then you're just stuck for over 10 years being like, well, okay, we're just at the climax, and it's a climax forever. You never know.
Yep.
Which also feels very him at the same time, because he is a person. I love that he can kill characters and it's not for shock factor. I think a
Yeah.
lot of books they kill someone off and it feels inauthentic almost. Like it
Yes.
feels like they're trying to do it to get you. But with him, it's like these gut wrenching, crazy things that feel just so real. And that's what I adore about it. I mean, Oberyn is one of my favorite characters. And sorry if you guys haven't read or watched Game of Thrones, but it's been a long time now, so I don't care. The way he dies is so beyond crazy, but it's so perfect for his character. And every piece of it's so meaningful and beautiful. It's really art, right? The way that he
Yeah, it's
does these certain deaths is art. It's this beautiful, crazy, tragic art that's really like it's him. He's done it. He's the only person. He began it. He started it. He's the one that really like grabbed a hold of it and ran with it, and it's incredible to me.
yeah, Oberyn Martell in this case. I'm thinking about great oh, you're talking about Oberyn Martell, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, who's I'm not going to ruin it, but I'll say one of my favorite analysis of George's work was a blog called the Myronese Knot, which was written by someone where they went through all the characters and they talked about how great they were and how terrific A Dance with Dragons is, from the perspective of thematic and genre. And Oberyn Martell is one of these classic instances of the prince who goes to save the princess, and how that just doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I also just love George R. R. Martin's take on honor and duty versus, real, because he almost brings in real life, right? We're all struggling, and like we always have that saying, the good guy doesn't always win. You have
Yeah,
guys like Ned Stark that are like the epitome of what it is to be a good person, an honorable person, and they get screwed. But then you have the complexity of my favorite literary character ever, Jaime Lannister, and you have this character that's kind of a sucky douchebag that turns into like this golden knight. Well, unless it's a show because they totally screwed up his character arc. But um, at the moment in the books, he's got the most beautiful, crazy character arc that after 5 books unfolds, and you're like, holy crap! It just gets better and better, and I really think that's incredible.
yeah, it's funny. The So how do you integrate these lessons into your work? You seem to be a romantic author from that tradition, in that you've suggested you write articles, romance articles, and in addition to that, your fantasy series. How do you try and bring out the best of the stuff that you like the most, while also making it your own?
Well, I actually just talked to my editor about this the other day. I was saying how I really like to pay homage to what I love. In all of my writing, you'll find people that I know in real life, things that I've experienced. You'll find the works that I love referenced in either a name or a place or something like that. You'll see these little pieces of what I love and cherish put into my work as an honor to those before me, basically. Which I think is really fun for me personally to pay tribute to all of the people that have paved way for me as a person and an author, and to pay tribute to their work that's really influenced me before or after. Uh, when I started Tales of Battle, I actually hadn't read a ton of fantasy because I had spent my years in college reading things like Uncle Tom's Cabin and a lot of Shakespeare and a lot of plays and a lot of Poe. So a lot of things that actually weren't fantasy, which is weird. And I started reading Game of Thrones, I think around the time I started book 2, writing it. And now I'm reading The Wheel of Time and everything. So, and the funny thing about my series is I bring in a lot of this magic. And then someone was like, "Oh, it kind of seems like Avatar a little bit." And I was like, "I've never even watched Avatar." So then I had to go watch Avatar to be like, "Is it really?" Which it is. So it's weird that things I've never really seen prior actually influence my work too. But everything I read or I watch that I really care about, I do put in small pieces of my work. I started writing poetry and lyrics when I was younger because it was how I would get my feelings out. Because someone that was in speech therapy and couldn't really talk and was always afraid to talk because people made fun of me. I would have to put everything into words in order to process it or to talk to someone. So it always came really natural to write down. And I was a super romantic when I was younger. It's still somewhere there in me. My favorite movie is P.S. I Love You. So I guess I'm romantic to an extent. I write for the magazine just because someone on Twitter presented me with the opportunity, messaged me and asked me if I wanted to. So I said, hell yeah, why not? Magazine writing's easy. Not easy, that sounds bad. Magazine writing is not easy, but it's less thinking and heartfelt than my books, where I pour my everything into. Because you're given a prompt, so it's like college. Magazine writing, they give you a prompt and you write it. So it's very similar to college in that way. Um, and I think fantasy is more what I write for the fact that I love building and I respect the building. And I I love creating this diverse world that is way outside of the little island I grew up on.
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned that you struggled with speech and hearing. What you don't mind sharing? What was that all about?
I was born pretty much deaf, but they were able to reverse it. Couple surgeries and whatnot. I spent, I don't know, 14 years going in and out of these little boxes with different pitches, different beeps. And now I can actually hear higher pitches or higher frequencies than a normal human, supposedly from the tests. And then I had a speech impediment, obviously, because I was delayed in language and I had a stutter and a stammer. So I was exempt from speaking in front of people all through high school because I tried and I would get made fun of and I didn't really know how to. And I always had to go through these flip books to learn words. And my sister very much made it so I would say think and not sink because that was TH
Uh-huh.
was really hard for me and my sister would terrorize me with it. So thanks to her, I think very hard before I say that word. When I get nervous, it comes out a lot more, but I've managed to conquer it. And in college, I took public speaking, which is way out of my alley because I love a good challenge. I got a good grade in it, and it actually taught me to that I don't have to be perfect in my speaking, and it also reminded me of how far I've come since then. So, yeah, just some surgeries, a lot of speech therapy and flip books, and being brought into a room by myself with a speech therapist and going over words. But
Well, Timothy, you've got a lot of grit, my friend. Uh,
thank you.
writing books, uh, uh, traveling, sort of moving past that. It's a very challenging thing, and I'm excited that we got to have you on the Dadlit Pod. And I hope that you see considerable success with your writing. Would you like to plug some of your stuff before we close out?
Sure. I mean, I'll plug Tales of Battle Book One and Book Two, especially because Book Three, The War for Crowns, is coming. It's in editing right now with Writers Journey Services. They're editing it, so book three is coming, so everybody should get book one and two of Tales of Battle. Please don't get God in the 12 Nights. I should take it down. Someone bought it, and I'm terrified because it's such bad writing. It was just like a fun side project that I should have never actually put up. If you like poetry, I have Writing with Wolves, which takes in my love of nature, my indigenous roots, and a little bit of romanticism. And then Loving Her is all romantic, my tragic love life, and also beautiful love life. Um, yeah, I did write a spicy romance. I co-authored it with my editor, which is called Mediterranean Waves, but that's a total different genre, and I'm not sure I want people reading both those books because one is really spicy and like I don't know, but it's also cool. So, but Tales of Battle is what all should actually read.
Well, go out and read Tales of Battle. That's Tails of Battle. Thank you, Timothy, for joining me on the Dadlit Pod, and really the best of luck, and we'd love to have you back.
Thanks for having me. I'm always up to come back, and I hope your podcast gets 10 million likes, especially on this one, but in general
Yeah,
too.
particularly on this one.